Hello and welcome to Nancy Goodaim, Space Ranger. This is chapter 12. It's a bit of a longer one and there's a bit of action in it and poor old Nancy ends up getting separated from the group. So we'll get started. An attempted assault on a large fat Martian sheriff by an ancient frail Jupiterian hag is a sight not to behold. The proverbial Jupiterian washerwoman's strike at the sheriff was both ponderous and ugly, and caused the sheriff to slowly walk backwards to avoid the possibility of being hit with a frail slap. "Old women declare war, but it is up to young women to fight it," noted the sheriff. "So calm down before you do yourself an injury." "Yeah," agreed Bart. "You're impressing nobody with that sort of behaviour. Nancy nearly took the head off you with a crossbow bolt a few seconds ago, and she'll just as soon nearly not take the head off you for carrying on like that. Isn't that right, Nancy?" Nancy wasn't listening to Bart. She was listening to the tree canopy, or more specifically, to the silence in it. Nancy was standing on the right bank of a stream running through a Jupiterian valley known as Táingeoughan, and the valley was running through a forest known as the Forest of Proverbs, which in turn was blanketing the lower slopes of a range of hills known as the Stormy Hills, which were in turn all located at the opposite side of the planet to her Jupiterian city destination known as Sosman City, formerly called Gongrakers. Nancy held a crossbow and was next to Bart. They were both facing Martina, the sheriff, who was also holding a crossbow, Chuz the Jupiterian, and a prisoner/Jupiterian hag, who was now relenting in her ineffective assault on the sheriff. "Why is it gone silent?" asked Nancy. In theory, she was on a mission to rescue the commander of herself and Bart's Mars mission, a man known as Jerry Staunton, along with a pair of Martians known as Budadaw and Flint, and also possibly the three-person crew of their sister Mars mission spacecraft. That was not really on her mind though. What was on her mind was the abrupt, eerie silence that had surrounded them. Chuz the Jupiterian was the first to respond to Nancy's question. "I've no idea, Nancy, but something is not right. We should be able to hear Gongrakers, Landbound Mullcruckets, and at the very least whistling Spontallagers. But I can't hear a thing. Even the wind seems to have stopped." "Táingeoughan," Croak whispered the old hag. She then circled her head 3 times with the fingertips of her right hand, and adopted what looked to be a terrified expression. Well, either terrified or surprised. It was hard to tell under all of her wrinkles. Nobody responded. Bart looked to Chuz for an explanation. "What does she mean?" "Why are you asking me?" "I'm asking you because you were from Jupiter, Chuz." "Oh yeah, fair enough. Well, it seems sort of familiar, like something I learned in immigration official training. Let me see. Yeah, I think it's sort of flying, I'm not sure. It's to do with the legendary breed Táingeoughan. Whatever it is, it's not good. But Breach killed it with a spinning kick. Or was that the devil? Sorry, I sort of space out the history part of her training." "For Abadikong's sake," cackled the woman. "The youth of today know nothing. The Táingeoughan is the most evil thing on Jupiter." "Hi, I'm 48 years old," said Chuz. Is the Táingeoughan worse than Sosman Borkstapel?" asked Martina. The old woman spat and looked at Martina dismissively. "Only one Jupiterian has ever set eyes on the Táingeoughan, and it is a sight none of ye will ever want to have in your heads, beyond words. So yes, more evil than Sosman, more evil than the devil. It was the gut who saved me." You? Are you Breach Táingeoughan? I thought she was dead," stammered Chuz. "I am both, boy. And do you consider washing scuttery shite off the wizard Oblerong's jocks living, son?" No. And I'm not a boy. I'm 48 years old. How is this possible? Are you Breach? The great Breach Táingeoughan?" The sheriff gave a loud cough. "Now, why is she great? What makes you say that?" he asked. "Because she spoke with a gut, and is the only Jupiterian to have ever done that." "I thought you died, Breach," replied Chuz. "I didn't die. I just ran away here, so the words of the gut could stay where they belong, in stories, and I could have peace." "Peace to wash underpants?" asked Bart. Nancy did not take her eyes from the tree canopy. She knew something knew they were there. She knew it had not seen them. She knew it meant them harm. and she knew it was looking. "We should get out of the open," she said. The old woman circled her head with her fingers 3 times. "How can you know that? Have you spoken with the gut?" she asked. "No, I haven't," replied Nancy. "But something tells me there's evil lurking above those trees, and that we should hide." "That something has to be the gut. I'm certain of it. It's the gut's way." The old hag lowered her voice as she spoke. "I've been living in the Forest of Proverbs for 60 years, and in all that time, not 1 second passed without the sound of whistling Spontallagers. Your friend with a good aim is right, folks. We should hide." I can speak with the gut too," announced the sheriff. "And, hang on, I'll just check what you should do." The sheriff cocked his head sideways with a pained concentration expression and announced, "We should all split up." "I didn't know the gut speaks to you," said Martina. "We should hide," urged Nancy. She could feel something terrible approaching them, circling above. She could feel its frustration that its victims were being obscured by trees. "Oh, well, the gut does speak to me. It had to choose a planet-bound representative, and I was the obvious choice," announced the sheriff. "So, what the gut has empowered me to think, is that we should split up." "In a forest? That sounds crazy," said Bart. "Ah, that is because the gut is mysterious, but always wise, which is why he would have chosen me to." The sheriff found his sentence cut short by a screech from the old hag/breed Táingeoughan. "The Táingeoughan has spotted us! Run! Save yourselves! I will hold it back!" The holding back of the Táingeoughan involved 3 things, each successively more difficult. The first involved the old hag/breed Táingeoughan standing to her full height, circling her head several times with her fingertips, and looking straight up at the tree canopy. This bought Nancy, Bart, Martina Ruddlesplitch, Chuz the Jupiterian, and the sheriff 11 seconds to make good their escape. The sheriff used this time to shout, "Split up, quickly! It's the gut's will! And keep split up! Nobody be beside anybody but themselves!" Bart used this time to identify some thick plant growth about 30 metres downstream and think to himself that it would make a good spot to hide. Martina Ruddlesplitch used the time to look up to see what the old hag was looking at. Chuz the Jupiterian used the time to say to the sheriff, "But if we all split up, how will the rest of us know what the gut is commanding us to do?" The second thing the old hag/breed Táingeoughan did was to scream the words, "Be slachter an your dove!" This bought Nancy, Bart, Martina Ruddlesplitch, Chuz the Jupiterian, and the sheriff a further 8 seconds to make their escape. The sheriff used the time to shout, "You're right, Chuz. Only I would know the gut's instructions if we split up. We better stay in a group." Bart used the time to shout, "Everybody follow me!" Martina Ruddlesplitch used the time between breed Táingeoughan screaming, "Be slachter an your dove!" and Bart saying, "Everybody follow me!" to look at the sheriff to see if he was going to announce what the gut wanted her to do. Now, the third thing the old hag/breed Táingeoughan did was emit a low rumbling bass hum and explode green plasma through the top of her head, drop dead and vanish. What followed was an enormous screech and a stunned creature dropping from the tree canopy onto the spot where the old hag/breed Táingeoughan had been. There are not really any human words to describe what it looked like. The closest description would be an unnotorious glomp with 18 torn tombernuckles protruding from its interior. A stunned unnotorious glump with 18 torn tombernuckles protruding from its interior. The sheriff looked briefly stunned himself. Bart was already heading for the thick plant growth he had spotted about 30 metres downstream. Martina and Chuz the Jupiterian followed. "Right, everybody follow Bart," announced the sheriff. I broke into a slightly too proud to run and trying not to look terrified trot so he could catch up with Martina, Chuz and Bart. The thick growth Bart had spotted was not unlike rhododendron, only the leaves were thicker and had hundreds of string-like veins trailing from them. It was an almost perfect hiding spot for an ex-immigration official, an astronaut/waitress, Bart McBurrow, and the sheriff. "Well done, everyone," congratulated the sheriff when they were all concealed. "Whisht," whished Bart. He was peering out of the bush over to where the Táingeoughan lay stunned. "That thing is moving." Bart watched as the Táingeoughan rose up on its hanging tombernuckles and extended a snout. It then began slowly and determinedly moving along the direction of the stream. It didn't so much as pause as it passed the Bart, Martina, Chuz and the sheriff concealing bush. "Well done, breed Táingeoughan," noted Chuz. "She was some woman for one woman." "And well done to me," added the sheriff, for being the Guts' representative in life and instructing ye on where to hide. What are you on about? I found this spot, said Bart. Something is different, noted Martina Ruddlesplitch. Hold on, are we missing anyone? Now, Nancy had been running before the Jupiterian hag/Breach Tantalium had ever finished screaming the words, "Pay slachter and your dove." Only Nancy had gone in a different direction to the group. Instinct, or something, had told her to follow the stream. She could hear a commotion behind her, but her mind and body were focused on jumping over rocks along the right bank of the stream and finding the quickest path down the shallow valley. What she did hear was Breach Tantalium screaming like a banshee, tree branches cracking and splintering, the sheriff shouting, "Keep split up! Nobody be beside anybody but themselves!" A low rumbling bass hum, and then silence. Nancy ran until she heard the sound of falling water. She had reached the edge of a gully. It dropped more than 30 feet to its base, and water was cascading down from the stream. Just so you know, the place Nancy had found is known as Suvinyaktok. Roughly translated, the name means hole in the snake. Most experts agree that the name comes from a Jupiterian legend, which, as Chuz pointed out, had it that a giant serpent slithered its way out from hell. Supposedly, it was so massive that this act created the stream. The story goes that the Gut was on hand with a spear at Suvinyaktok. A young girl named Breach Tantalium has been watching the Gut watching the serpent. Just as the serpent came level with them, the Gut threw the spear to the young girl. The girl instinctively spun the spear around and killed the serpent with one strike. Jupiterian history/legend has it that the serpent vanished and that the waterfall next to Nancy marked the spot where the spear struck. A less well-known theory states that Suvinyach means hole in the bishop, as the word Suvinyach Torok can be shortened to Suv, and Nyach is an old Jupiterian word for hole. This would mean that Nancy was now staring down a bishop's hole. Of course, bishops don't exist on Jupiter, and nor do serpents, truth be told. But magic does. "Nancy!" came a voice. The water was speaking to her. "Whisht!" she whished. "That's not very polite, Nancy. You're very uppity for someone who is about to do themselves in by jumping off this gully." "I am not. I'm trying to escape from an evil entity and rescue my commander and 2 Martians and maybe the crew of a spacecraft and find a way back to Earth and remember where I came from and I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing." The water gurgled before replying. "That's what they all say. Are you sure it's not guilt over the death of that deputy you killed in Chapter 3 that brought you to this place?" No. I don't think so. I mean, I feel guilty about that, but our situation was desperate and he wouldn't shut up." Replied the water. "Far be it from me to tell you what to do with your life, but your actions created a deputy-sized hole in life on Mars. And if you really want to atone for your sin..." The water paused to release a large gush into the gully. "Then you'll fill that deputy-sized hole with the rescue of Budadaw and Flint from the clutches of Sosman Borkstapel, just like the deputy would have done had you not appeared into his mourning." The water paused again to spit a stone over the edge and said, "Well, maybe that's a bit of a stretch. Let's just call it rescuing Budadaw and Flint, just like the deputy would have imagined himself doing on a good day." Nancy took her time replying. She looked into the gully. She looked up at the top of the trees. Then she looked into the gully again. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet," said the water. "The Táingeoughan is headed your way, and it has in its head to enslave you. Oh, and by the way, those friends of yours are hiding in a zockaldong bush about 3/4 of a mile upstream." The water gurgled to a brief silence, spat a stone over the ledge, and then continued flowing and talking. "You know something? This would be a much different and much darker story were it not for Breach Tantalium. You know, she sacrificed her life for ye, which was nice." "More than nice. Heroic," muttered Nancy. "Not really," gurgled the stream. "She'd only be going back to a life of washing underpants for the wizard Obleron, and he's a total flute. So, Breach was being nice, but not heroic." Nancy turned to scan the forestry behind her. She was once more on alert to the movement of something evil. The water gurgled. "Right, Nancy, I'm off downstream." Nancy nodded a goodbye to the stream and began looking for a way to get down past the gully. That's that for chapter 12. 13 is next week, and thank you if you've stuck the course so far.